The studio lights glowed like small suns above the stage, steady and unblinking. The air was cool, filled with the faint hum of machinery and the low murmur of the audience waiting for something between laughter and surprise. On the tall backdrop, the words, "Jimmy Kimmel Live," shimmered in silver, a quiet promise of entertainment. At the center of the set stood a long wooden table. 2 chairs faced each other, one marked Crockett, the other Trump. A stack of papers lay between them, white, clean, and a little threatening in their stillness. Jimmy Kimmel himself leaned on his desk, grinning, his voice calm and easy as he spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "tonight, we have something a little different. No debates, no shouting matches. Just a good old-fashioned test of intelligence. Mr. Crockett versus Mr. Trump. The IQ test he can't pass." The audience laughed softly, the sound rolling like a tide before settling again. The camera turned to Crockett, a tall man with gentle eyes, a hint of humor always ready at the corner of his mouth. His suit was simple, his tie slightly crooked, as though he didn't care to be perfect. Next to him sat Trump, his golden hair gleaming under the lights, his face a calm mask of confidence. He gave a small nod, as if to say this will be easy. In the front row, 2 guests sat quietly, Nikolai and Anya, visiting from Moscow. They had come to Los Angeles by chance, tourists who had somehow found their way into this taping. Nikolai was a teacher, quiet and thoughtful. Anya, his daughter, was a student of psychology. She leaned forward, her eyes bright with curiosity. The first question appeared on the screen behind them. If 5 cats can catch 5 mice in 5 minutes, how many cats are needed to catch 100 mice in 100 minutes? Crockett smiled faintly. He scribbled something on his sheet and set down his pen. Trump stared at the question for a long moment. His lips moved silently, counting. Then he looked up. "Easy," Trump said, his voice steady. "You'd need 100 cats." The audience chuckled. Crockett shook his head gently. "Actually," he said softly, "just 5. The laughter grew louder, but it wasn't cruel. It was warm, human, people enjoying a simple moment of honesty. Jimmy Kimmel raised an eyebrow. "You sure, Crockett?" Crockett nodded. "If 5 cats can do it in 5 minutes, they can keep the same pace. Time doesn't change the ratio." Nikolai smiled from the audience. He whispered to his daughter, "That's proportional reasoning. It's the kind of logic my students struggle with." Trump frowned, as though the question had betrayed him somehow. He shifted in his chair, looking toward the cameras, then toward the audience. "Well," he said, "that's not how I'd run a business. I'd use more cats and get it done faster." The room laughed again, gently. Even Crockett chuckled. The test continued. Each question was simple, but not easy, puzzles of words, patterns, and quiet patience. Crockett approached them like a man solving a riddle from an old book. Trump approached them like negotiations, loudly at first, then with growing irritation when the answers refused to bend. As the minutes passed, the atmosphere in the studio changed. The audience stopped laughing quite so quickly. There was something unexpectedly touching in watching 2 very different men face the same small challenges. Each time Crockett solved a problem, he smiled humbly, as though the joy was in understanding, not in winning. Each time Trump stumbled, his pride seemed to fight against the silence around him. Anya watched him closely. "He's not used to being wrong," she whispered. Nikolai nodded. "No, some people never learn to sit quietly with uncertainty." Then came the visual reasoning part of the test, patterns of shapes that changed in quiet, predictable ways. Crockett leaned forward, studying each line, tracing invisible paths in the air. Trump tapped his pen impatiently. Finally, he muttered, "These are rigged. They make no sense." Crockett looked up. His voice was soft. "They make sense if you look long enough." Trump glanced at him, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something, perhaps respect, or confusion, or the first hint of humility. Jimmy Kimmel filled the silence with a small joke, but the laughter that followed was different now, quieter, more reflective. When the test ended, the audience applauded. The papers were collected, and Jimmy leaned back in his chair, smiling. "All right," he said. "The results will be back in a few minutes. In the meantime, how are we feeling?" Crockett smiled. "Grateful," he said simply. "It's good to be reminded that thinking can be peaceful." Trump crossed his arms. "I think these tests are overrated," he said. "They don't measure real-world intelligence." Jimmy nodded kindly. "That might be true," he said. "But they measure patience, and that's something, too." The lights softened. A short commercial break rolled, and in the audience, people began to whisper. Anya turned to her father. Do you think intelligence can really be tested like that? Nikolai thought for a moment. Not fully, he said. But sometimes, tests reveal how we respond when we don't know the answer. That's also a